Hi, everyone. Welcome to another segment in Chapter 6, a firm's production decisions and costs in the short run. In this section, we're going to take a closer look at something called marginal and variable costs. In our last segment, we talked about production, output, and input. And here we're going to transition that and start looking at the marginal and variable costs. It's a critical, important concept in microeconomics. So you can see in the first line there, while production relates the number of units produced, or the output, to the amount of labor used, or the input, it really isn't talking about costs at all, but we know that that costs to produce. So cost relates the number of units produced to the dollars you pay for the inputs. So costs, of course, depend on the level of production. For example, how many workers you hire, how much labor you're paying for, as well as how much you want to produce. What is the level of the total output that you're producing? Now, there's two broad categories of costs: fixed costs and variable costs, and we will definitely go into the fixed costs in a little while. But for this segment, when we're talking about variable costs, we're tying it to the theory of production, and that all focuses on the variable aspect. None of it focuses on the fixed aspect. So right now, we're just going to focus on variable costs. So total variable costs, it should make sense that those are the total costs that vary with the level of output. So it's all costs, because we said total, and variable costs. So they vary with the level of output. So as you produce more, variable costs are going to rise. Okay, that makes sense. But then what is marginal cost? And marginal cost is very similar in concept to marginal product. It's the increase or the change in total variable costs as a result of producing one more unit of output. So marginal cost, change in total variable cost over change in total output. Go back and relate that to marginal product, and you'll see that they're very similar concepts, only this is on the cost side of things. Okay, enough time to think about it. Marginal cost, remember, is the change in total variable cost from producing one more unit of output. So it's change in TVC over change in total output. And there's one more cost that we need to look at. We've got total variable, marginal cost, and now we've got average variable cost. And that's simple to arrive at. You simply take the total variable cost and divide by total output. Remember, anytime you're doing an average, you're dividing by something, and here the average is the average based on the total output. So you just take total variable cost divided by total output, and what you've got is average variable cost. So I'm going to write something on the bottom. I'll close the camera off and speed ahead, but I already mentioned that total cost, well, that had to be equal to, we said we had variable costs and fixed costs. So total costs are just going to be the sum of total fixed costs plus total variable costs. Variable costs vary with the amount of production. Total fixed costs, well, they're the same no matter what the level of the production is. So I want to take it to average costs, and I'll fill that in while I put the recording on pause. Okay, all done with my little writing here. And what I wanted to do is relate average total cost, average fixed cost, and average variable cost to their total counterparts. It doesn't take too much to think, okay, if we've got total costs, they're going to be the sum of all the total fixed costs and the total variable costs. Well, to get the averages, you just divide each one by quantity. So total cost divided by quantity equals average total cost. Total fixed cost divided by a quantity equals average fixed cost. And total variable cost divided by quantity is going to equal average variable cost. Now we'll put this all in a nice neat table at the end of the segment today. But for now, let's just absorb that. That's 6 of our 7 new costs right there. Well, kind of the most important cost is marginal cost. And that's the change in total variable cost due to the change in total output, which we've already shown on the previous slide. It's worth repeating here because it is very critical. And notice that change in total output is the same as change in TP, which is total product, or change in Q, which is change in quantity. So let's clear this and go look at these on a table and make a little bit more sense of them. So if you read down the table, on the left side, all we have is units of labor hired, and this is going to be our transition point. We're going to go from units of labor hired and total production to variable costs. So here we're hiring 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The total output, boards per hour, remember this is me building a fence, was 4 and then 16 and then 3. And when we hired 4 people, it was 60 up to a high of 84. Excuse me. So the marginal product they've already given us, that's just the change in total product due to a change in labor. That's the formula for marginal product from the last segment. Well, that equals 4. And here the change in total product due to a change in labor, 4 to 16, well, that equals 12. And so on. And marginal product goes up to a maximum and then falls. So that's due to the division of labor. Then we hit the point of diminishing returns and the law of diminishing returns kicks in. Okay, then we calculated the average product, which is just the total product over the quantity. And we saw that the average product rose till 15. You always pick the second one. And then it fell. So law or division of labor helped increase average product to the point of maximum productivity. And then it fell off past that because of the law of diminishing returns. Okay, now we've got some new stuff to look at. I'll just bring this down, separate it out. And this is the new stuff in red. Now we want to look at total variable cost, marginal cost, and average variable cost. And we get it from our production theory. We have to be given something, and this is what we're giving. 120 total variable cost when the total output is 4, the units of labor are 1. Well, that tells us that a unit of labor costs $120. So this may be per day. Okay, that's critical because then once we build this total variable cost, we can fill out all these last 2 columns. Well, what if there's 2 units of labor? Well, 2 times 120 is 240. What if there's 3 units of labor? 3 times 120 is 360, and now you get the dance, 480, 600, 720, 7 times $120 for labor is $840. So we've got our total variable cost that we figured out because we were smart enough to see that the only thing that varies in this production process is labor. So 1 labor made the total variable cost jump to 120. So we know what 1 labor costs. Then we just fill in the rest. Now, marginal cost, if you look at the formula, that's the change in total cost due to the change in output, not due to the change in labor. That's critical. It's worth repeating. Marginal cost is the change in output, the change in total variable cost due to a change in output, not due to a change in labor. So from here to here, my output changed by 4. My total variable cost changed by 120. 120 divided by 4, that equals 30. Now my total variable cost changed by 120. 120 divided by my change in output, 4 to 16, that's 12. 120 divided by 12 is 10, and so on. Here's another 120, but it's divided by, well, it's actually divided by the marginal product of 20. So that's 6. And then you just keep going down this whole column and get to the bottom. And again, the change in total variable cost was, I'll go here, was 120 to get to this point. And the change in output was 9. That's actually the change in output was 9. And so that shows a marginal cost of 13.3. So, excuse me, one thing I want to identify is, look, marginal cost falls to a minimum and then turns around and starts rising. Well, it's the flip side of marginal product. marginal product rises to a maximum and then starts falling off. So this point of diminishing returns is exactly the same as here. So if you're looking at this marginal cost curve, you find a point of diminishing returns, sure, that's when it reaches its minimum. So let's look at average cost. The way we calculate average cost is we take the total variable cost and divide by the quantity. So we're calculating average variable cost. The total variable cost here is 120, and the total output is 4. 120 divided by 4 is 30. So here, now the total variable cost is 240. And we divide by the total output, which is 16. So that should equal 15. And we continue to go down to the very end where we see that the total cost happens to be 840. Total variable cost has to be 840. And we divide by an output of 84. So our average variable cost is 10. Okay, so keep in mind, we were looking at variable costs here. And now look, average variable cost falls to a minimum and turns around and starts rising. Just like average product rises to a maximum, and right at the same point, it starts falling off. That point is the point of maximum productivity. So this point on the average variable cost curve is also the point of maximum productivity. So really understand and see that those two curves are the exact flip side of each other. And that last point I said, that they're the total flip of each other, is shown so very well in this graph here. So if we look at this very last statement, variable costs of production are a reflection of productivity. You can think of it as a mirror image of productivity. So let's look at the product curves up here at the top. And there's our marginal product curve, showing as we add more labor, what's happening to average and marginal product. Well, marginal product reaches a maximum right where we are at a minimum of our marginal cost. Notice the black dotted line coming down. When we have 4 units of labor and we're producing an output of 60, we're at maximum marginal product and minimum marginal cost. Well, that's the point of diminishing returns. Okay, so what about the maximum of average product? Well, that's what we said, we're at our maximum productivity at a labor use of 5 and an output of 75, our average variable cost reaches a minimum. So that's also the point of maximum productivity. So now you can actually look at cost curves and find maximum marginal product, which would be right there. Look at that carefully and understand that. And if you want to find maximum productivity of this production process, you just find the minimum of average variable cost. So then they summarize it over on the left, kind of nice. Marginal cost is minimum when marginal product is maximum, and that's the point of diminishing returns, just like what we said right here and right here. Okay, marginal product intersects average product at its maximum. All right, so that's just because the marginal, if it's above average, average will rise. Marginal cost intersects average variable cost at its minimum. Okay, that's because when marginal cost is below average variable, it's falling. But as soon as it cuts through, average starts rising. So it's cutting it at its minimum. And then the thing that we already concluded is variable costs are just simply a flip side or a reflection of the productivity curves. But keep in mind, it's variable costs that are the flip side. We're going to start looking at total costs and fixed costs later. So in this example, take a look at what they've given us. They've got units of labor 0, total output 0, because you don't have any workers doing anything. So total variable cost is 0, because you're not paying any workers anything. So then they say, okay, what about at 1 unit of labor? Then you can make a total output of 100 and total variable cost is 200. So I want to ask you, what does a unit of labor cost? Hopefully you're thinking, well, 1 unit of labor and the total variable cost jumps to 200. So that's what the 1 unit of labor costs. So now I'm away to the races, so to speak. I know what to do. I can fill in the rest of the table. 2 units of labor, the total variable cost must be 400. 3 units of labor, it must be 600. Remember, 1 unit was 200. So 4 units is 800. All right, all the way down to 6 units times 2 would be 1200. That's what my total variable costs are. All right, what's my marginal cost? Remember, the formula is change in total variable cost over change in total output. And this time I'm going to make it a Q, not to confuse you, but because that's change in quantity produced. Change in total output, or change in TP, total product. So then I just go down and look, what's my change in total variable cost here? That's 200. What's my change in not labor, but output? It's 100. So my marginal cost for the first 200 is 2. 200 divided by 100. Now I want to go to the next one. I say, what's my change in total variable cost? 200 to 400, that's 200. But my change in total output is 1 to 220. That's 120. So it's 200 divided by 120. So make sure that you can see that. That's 1.67, my marginal cost. And then I go on and on from there, and I just keep finding what's my change in total variable cost. That's 200. What's my change in total output? That's 100. So my marginal cost starts rising again. That shouldn't be a surprise. And if you calculate the rest of them, you'll see marginal cost is 250, and then marginal cost drops to 333, and then rises, and then marginal cost rises to 10. Okay, so let's calculate average variable cost. That's just total variable cost divided by output produced. So I just go here, total variable divided by output. So 200 divided by 100, that's 2. And then the next one is 400 of total variable cost divided by 220. And if you divide that out, that's 1.82. And you keep going down. So total variable cost here is 600 divided by 320. And that comes to 1.88. And then I go to the next one. Total variable cost is 800 divided by 400. That comes to 2. And then it just keeps going up to 2.17. Calculating the last one, you'd get 2.5. So notice here, we just calculated these, but notice marginal cost falls and then rises. And average cost, average variable cost, falls and then rises. And both of those, if you have to explain it, are due to the division of labor. Yep, we talked about division of labor under production theory, and we said that was the reason that marginal product rose initially, and how average product rose initially was due to the division of labor, and people get good in their specialized tasks. Then they hit the law of diminishing returns, and things go a little south after that. Well, it's the same thing with marginal costs. We're looking on the cost side. The costs are reducing every incremental increase in output because of division of labor. Then they hit their minimum and they turn around and start rising because of the law of diminishing returns. It's exactly applicable, those two things, whether you're talking about production theory or variable cost theory. So we end this segment here just doing the math on the variable costs because it ties directly into production theory. We mentioned there were other costs. So in the next segment, we're going to explore fixed costs, total fixed costs, which will give us total costs, and average fixed costs. So we will see you when we get there.